First of all, welcome and good evening, everyone. This is Vijay William here. I lead the business team at OP Jindal Global University, and I'm really honored to host this today's design leadership webinar, which is presented by Jindal School of Design and Architecture and the Foundation for Experience, Transformation, and Design. So, if in case I speak about today's topic, it's going to be how to get into top tier UX jobs. So, before we begin, a quick word. I would like to speak about the university first. I think just a minute. Yeah. OP Jindal Global University, or in short, abbreviated as JGU, is an institution of eminence which is recognized by Government of India and which was established in 2009, and it has emerged as one of India's leading multidisciplinary and research-intensive universities with a strong commitment to academic excellence, global engagement, and interdisciplinary learning. If today I speak about the university, JGU is home to over 16,000 students with more than 1,100 faculty members and maintains collaboration with 575 plus international institutions across the world, creating a truly global learning ecosystem. And I'm very delighted to all have all of you today, for this particular program, which is Masters of Design and User Experience with AI. And today's accreditation for this particular program, we have also been accredited by DASCA. That being said, I'm going forward with an introduction of the panelist. So, if in case I start off with a quick word about our MDes in UX program, university curricula. Often, we have been in an industry for 5 to 6 years, leaving students underprepared. As one of only four private universities in India with Institute of Eminence status, Hopi Jindal had the autonomy to fix the gap, building the first program of its kind in partnership with the Foundation for Experience Transformation and Design, whose founders have been INC 5000 honors for 4 straight years and Fast Company Innovations Award winners, alongside Google and Apple. OP Jindal is now ranked number one in India by QA ranking and is DASCA accredited, and this program has delivered strong outcomes since the launch. To take this further, I'm honored to introduce Career Reactors founder and professor of practice at OP Jindal Global University, Professor Prasad Kantamani. He is a head of UX programs with over 25 years of work experience. He has built, trained, and mentored high performance design teams across the globe. He founded UX Reactor and INC 5000 company and sold it. He has contributed to over 12 papers and patents. Notably, he designed the search assistance feature used by every internet user worldwide. He's worked with world's best such as Yahoo, Honeywell, VMware, and LinkedIn, to mention a few. He's also an alumnus of Harvard Business School. Also with us today is Saurabh from Career Reactor, who's actually leading the program initiative. So welcome once again, Professor Prasad, and hi, Saurabh. And I also welcome all of you on a weekday evening for joining this particular webinar. And I would request Professor Prasad to take it over.
Thank you, Vijay. I intend for this session to be, fairly conversational in nature. I'm going to present what we are seeing out of the market and what opportunities you have. And I'd love for you to ask any questions or thoughts. And I want to make sure that I'm addressing all of your questions because I understand this is a period of significant churn and there's lots of questions that each one of you might have. So I want to make sure we are answering everything. So that said, we did a little survey, a small survey, where we asked, well, what do you want to learn? And the number one thing that most people asked for was, well, how do I use AI to do my job search effectively? Okay. Then the second one was how to position my portfolio and experience. And then the third question was, what are companies actually evaluating in interviews? Okay. So I've got some good news. For the number one thing, I think we can teach you that in less than 30 seconds. Okay. And then we will talk about the challenge with that problem. So let's go on to the next one. So if all you wanted to do was how would you use AI for your job search? Okay. It's fairly straightforward. Take your base resume, upload it to Claude. I like Claude right now because that is the flavor. But I'm sure there'll be other AI tools that will get better. It's a race, neck to neck race. But again, take your resume, upload it to Claude, take the JD, and ask it three simple things, right? One is say, look at this JD, tailor my resume for the JD. optimize my resume to pass the application tracking system. Okay. Which is again, you have to understand that there is an AI on the other side that is looking at your resume and saying, does it fit or not? And then the third one is surface the most relevant experience for this particular role. Okay. So this is literally all you have to do in 60 seconds. Okay. Which opens the door for you to at least kind of get recognized and kind of be filtered. At level one filtering is going to be done. You're 90% sure that you'll get past the level one filtering. But here's the problem. Okay. Almost every other person is doing exactly the same thing. Okay. What that means is 75% of your competition that is applying for the same jobs has done exactly the same thing with AI. I mean, you go on LinkedIn or wherever, you'll see dozens of prompts that will tell you how to do this. And all they're doing is they're looking at those prompts, copying and pasting it. Everybody's resume looks amazing. Okay. Everybody's resume looks very, very relevant. Okay. Now, what happens earlier if the applicant tracking system was, say, filtering, 90% of the people out and keeping 10% of the people in, now you've got like 75% of the people are getting filtered in. Everybody seems to be relevant. Everybody looks really good. Well, how does a company now react to it? Okay. That is the more important question. In the age of AI, the first problem, of course, is to get filtered. But the second problem, what happens after filtering? Okay. Because now you are now filtered amongst the whole group of people that have used AI. So let's go on to the next slide. Right? So in order to understand what happens after filtering, let's take a step back and think about what the bigger picture looks like. Okay. In terms of what is happening in the job market. Okay. And then we kind of start looking at what we can do with AI. And you will realize that AI is a small little part of the larger picture that is changing in the job market. In fact, we will also talk about how the interviews have changed significantly. Okay. So the questions that you should be asking is, well, without AI, am I good enough? Okay. Now, the next question that companies are looking at is, okay, well, what can you tell me, right? How good are you without an AI? Okay. Because if you're with an AI, if everybody is average, what companies are realizing is people who are genuinely good, okay, without an AI are going to be outperforming the people who are good with AI. Okay. So now that question comes as like, okay, how am I going to evaluate you if the AI wasn't there? Okay. And then the next question that companies are looking at, well, how did you drive outcomes? Okay. So these are the questions that companies are fundamentally looking at and evaluating from every candidate's perspective. So let's go to the next slide. All right. Now, this is another interesting thing, which is the job growth. Okay. So till 2022, the jobs were growing fairly fast and very aggressively. Okay. Now, there were design teams of 10, 15, 20 people. The demand was so much before that companies were willing to say, okay, you don't have a degree, you don't have any qualifications, doesn't matter, you got an HFI certification, that's good, or whatever it is, that's good. Let me simply look at your portfolio. Is your portfolio, does it look good enough? And then once its portfolio is good enough, let's hire and let's work on this. Okay. But something changed in 2022, right? Right after the pandemic happened. Now, pandemic, what it did was it accelerated the amount of hiring because every company was like, the economy just took off like crazy during the pandemic, especially the IT industry. And then, all of a sudden, because of AI, now that over hiring that happened suddenly went back. So between 23 to 24, we saw 71% loss in jobs. Actually, the 22 and 23. Okay. We saw 71% loss in jobs. It's not just UX, it happened across the board with engineering, product management, you name it. Across the board, there was 71% losses in jobs. However, what we are seeing between last year to this year, or either 24 to 25, we've seen a 60% recovery in the jobs as well. But those jobs that were lost are very different from the jobs that are recovering. Okay. That means the requirements are different, the focus of the companies are different, and we will kind of get into that as well. Okay. So let's go on to the next slide. Now, as we start thinking about what kind of jobs came back and what kind of companies are hiring, I want you to look at this one slide and understand, because not all companies behave the same way, not all companies got hit the same way. Okay. At the beginning of the thing, you have the low maturity companies where they say, okay, just give me something that looks good. I don't understand UX. I don't need to understand UX. Okay. Now, for these guys, their core response was, let's use AI to replace work. So this was the bottom of the pyramid where the majority of the jobs used to exist. Okay. Now, for the bottom of the pyramid, most of these jobs literally have vanished or in the process of vanishing. Okay. Because now what the companies are saying is, can I use AI to automate my screens, just build out a screen as long as it looks good? That's great. That's all I need. So to understand how AI is impacting different companies and how different companies are reacting to this, it's really important to understand the maturity of the company and the kind of opportunities that are there. Okay. The lowest maturity companies are the ones that are looking at aesthetics, and this is where the majority of the hiring used to take place. Um, they didn't necessarily care about UX. They said, make it look good, make it work. That's what we are going to focus on. And so that was the primary goal. Now, most of these companies, what they're doing is they're just saying, can we automate it? Because if I can, get a similar experience with, say, ChatGPT or whatever other product that is out there, then why do I really, or even Figma right now has it, or Adobe has a lot of AI driven tools. They're like, well, why do I even need a designer to do something that is already being done? So fundamentally, at the lower end of the maturity cycle, UX jobs are clearly being replaced by AI. Okay. Now, this is where the talent is being oversupplied, because unfortunately, a lot of people, get to this level and this is where they are. But, the salaries are dropping very fast and the demand for those roles are dropping very fast as well. Now you have type 2 companies. Type 2 companies are companies that have an understanding of what UX is, but they don't necessarily know how to do it on a regular, consistent basis. So they're kind of struggling, but they are emerging. They're trying to figure out how to make this happen. So essentially, what is happening with them is they are linking outcomes, or they're linking the productivity to the individual's salary. Okay. What that basically means is they're saying, okay, if you're a designer who can do visual, okay, if you're a designer who can do research, if you're doing something else, right? If you can do multiple things, but now you can use AI to do it a lot faster. Okay. That is where the opportunity is. So they still understand that UX is valuable. They haven't understood how to get there. And that is where they're saying, okay, I want my employees to be more productive. So what they're essentially looking at is their talent demand is either flat or just going down a little bit lower. Okay. But at the same time, there's still a significant amount of supply, because this was all type 2 talent that was available before. They're still trying to do it, but the salary has more or less remained pegged to productivity. So that means if you can do more work in unit time, you get more money. If you are able to do the same amount of work, then your salary has stagnated. Okay. And this is where type 2 companies are that's how they're approaching it. But then when we look at the other end of the spectrum, the type 3 companies, which is what I believe is where the future is and where the opportunities are, right? And we've been talking about this for a while, where design is shaping strategy within the organization, where companies are willing to pay for judgment, right? The judgment that you bring to the table, where companies understand that if you are all doing work and you're using AI, chances are you will all come up with similar experiences. So how do you differentiate your product in a market that's very, very busy? Okay. That's where type 3 companies are. So the demand has increased significantly in these kinds of companies. Okay. Now, the supply, unfortunately, has not increased. Even before 2022, the supply was very, very less. And what you're talking about is, a lot of these companies that know what good design is and understand the value of design for their business, That's where there is a supply for talent has always been low, but the demand has only gone up. Okay. And the salaries, interestingly, in type 3 companies have gone up by almost about 30%. So the opportunity that we see for people is people who can come in from the perspective of understanding UX and understanding the higher order processes are now in greater demand than ever. So let's go on to the next slide. Now, here are a couple of other forces that are working out in the workplace. Okay. The number one thing is teams are getting smaller, where there used to be teams of 20 people, 30 people working before. Now you're just talking very small teams, and teams are becoming cross-functional. And so what that means is earlier you would have like 3 or 4 designers working with product managers, engineers, business folks. Now it's just like one designer, one product manager, one marketing person, one engineer. So it's a small team. You are accountable. You're driving it. That's one aspect. The other aspect that is happening is speed is being compressed. So what used to take 6 months, now companies saying, let's ship it in a week or two. Okay. Now, there's also another very interesting data point that we said was almost 85% of companies that leverage AI fail in the project, right? Or not companies, but initiatives. And that's also part of the issue. When the speed increases, mistakes happen, and those mistakes amplify. And so that's the other aspect that companies are looking at, people who can identify those mistakes before they happen and they can ship with it. The third aspect is enshetification. Now, this is a term that I did not create, but the point is enshetification means if all AIs are trained on the same data, the quality of your output is also going to be average. Okay. So that is a huge problem that every mature design company is focused on is how do I differentiate myself? We all use AI. We are all average. Now, how do we become above average? How do we get to the next level? So that is a huge challenge that is driving hiring and recruitment in type 3 companies. The third aspect, of course, is, from a recruiter's perspective, where you used to have about 400 applications, you have 4,000 applications because the bottom of the pyramid is shrinking in terms of the number of jobs. The top of the pyramid, everybody wants the high quality talent, but along with that talent, you have to now deal with 4,000 applications. How do you decide who's better and who's not? That is the larger problem that every company is facing in terms of how do I build out these amazing teams? Let's go on to the next slide. So what are companies looking at? Fundamentally, earlier, what used to happen is for a majority of the cases, people would look at the UI element. Okay, can you do good screens? Can you do good designs, right? And then the UX was under the water, where it's like, okay, yeah, you can do UX, you can do some research, whatever, and then you join the company, you do what you can. But the primary selling point was the UI element. Today, it is completely flipped. Okay. If UI is automated by AI, then what is it that the people are able to do? Then it's got to be the UX element, right? And that is exactly what companies are looking for. Companies are hiring for your judgment. They're hiring for your UX abilities, your decision-making skills. That is what they're looking at. So fundamentally, the way the skills that companies are looking at has changed in that perspective. Let's go to the next slide. Now, here's another interesting thing. If your timelines are extremely short, and this, in fact, I've heard from multiple recruiters, is what they do. In fact, this is one of the rejection criteria. If your timelines are extremely short and somebody comes in with a 2022-23 resume and says, I did research, I did the double diamond process, I did my prototype, I did my testing, I did my shipping. Turns out that is an automatic criteria for rejection because you cannot realistically do this whole process in a matter of 2 weeks, right? So the question that companies are basically looking at is saying, well, what outcome did you drive? Okay. Well, how did you make decisions? What were the alternatives? What was the positives and negatives of each of these alternatives, right? They're also looking at, okay, you did this last year. Now, if you had to do it this year, how would you do it? What would you change? So these are fundamentally questions that are related to value that you're driving within your organization, the judgment that you're displaying, as well as the self-awareness that you have for what you've done. Okay. Now, does that mean that your process is not important? Not really, right? The process is still, I mean, those elements are still important. But what is important is, do you have the judgment to understand what part of the process is wasting time and what part of the process is adding value to the project? Okay. And have you understood the new workflows that happen with AI? Because the previous way of doing things is unfortunately or fortunately all gone, right? So now, do you understand the new development process, right? And that's fundamentally what people are looking at in people's portfolios. And in fact, portfolios at the initial stages, this is actually they're using portfolios more for rejection than for selection. Let's go on to the next slide. Now, here is what is happening in terms of the process. Okay. Earlier, you used to apply, there would be a recruiter. The recruiter would look at basic keywords. They would look at, the basic fit, right? Then they would pass it on to some technical person. The technical person will look at, the 40 or 50 resumes that have been passed over. And they will very quickly look at the portfolio and says, does it look good? Is it promising for me? Then they will sign off and say, okay, let's do an interview or let's do a design task for this person. And then once the design task is done, you come in for an interview, done, right? Now, let's actually look at how this process has changed with AI and with the number of applicants being increased, right? So when you have 4,000 applications, you're very quickly saying, how do you decide who's good or who's bad, right? It's qualifications, it's pedigree, it's your work history, it's also your referrals. Are you able to get referrals into the system? Is somebody vouching for you? Now, these are all elements that recruiters are using to very quickly bring down that 4,000 people down to 400 people, right? Now, they're also using portfolios for negative patterns where they're saying, okay, does this person still stuck to the old process? Is this person still talking in terms of the old world ways, right? So that is where or does this person talk about outcomes? So these are like very quick ways that you're saying, okay, good way to reject these people. Okay. Now, the second part is the portfolio review. Now, notice interestingly in the new paradigm, the importance of design tasks has reduced significantly because again, anybody can come in and do a design task with AI. If I'm doing an offline design task, you can go to an AI, design something, push it back. Now, the question is, well, did this person do it or did this person not do it? Nobody knows about it. Right? And so, given that kind of a challenge, the whole point of doing a design task is counterintuitive. So, companies are realizing that as a design task is not worth it to kind of identify the people. So, quite a few of the companies that I'm aware of are dropping it off, and more companies are considering that this is not going to be a relevant component anymore. Okay. However, what they are going to look at in the initial portfolio interview is like, what outcomes are you driving? Have you written that in your portfolio? They look at your LinkedIn profile. Do they say like, what kind of a brand do you have? Do you know what you're talking about? What is your professional presence? So those are the things that they're very quickly making a decision on. They're also looking at, again, what companies you've worked with, what is your pedigree. So these are all elements that are kind of coming in. So, and then finally, when you come into the interview, this is where they're going to use your portfolio or maybe a mini design task. You do something and they'll ask you, well, why did you do something? What problem were you solving? How would you do it, right? If you had to do it all over again, how would you think about it? Okay. So that is where the new model is changing as far as the interview is concerned, is looking at the critical skills. All right. Now, let's go on to the next slide. Now, again, one thing I do want to say when you go into the previous slide, and I will definitely give you a chance to kind of ask your questions as well, is this is where we see the interviewing change. So one of the interesting things that I've also seen is I've seen companies hire people in the US to do their interviews for them. Never seen that before, right? Now, again, that is interesting because if I'm hiring somebody in the US to run an interview for me and tell me whether somebody is good or not, I'm actually I'm putting a global standard for my talent pool as well in India. So that is also something that has changed in terms of expectations for companies. And again, it's not to say 100% of the companies are doing it, but we see this pattern change, and this is only going to accelerate in the coming years. Do people do design tasks today? Absolutely, they do design tasks today. Are they going to do it tomorrow? Maybe less likely. They have to tomorrow a little bit less. But that move away from the design tasks to thinking more about the critical thinking, the judgment, and and then the depth and your communication styles, those guys start become more and more important as we progress. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay. So now, how do you prepare for that kind of an environment? Right? The environment, number one, is start thinking about what evidence do you have that can hold up, right? So you know that now companies are looking at critical thinking skills. They're looking at your cross-functional communication. They're looking at your reasoning and your thought process. So then, what data do you have? Are you outcome driven? Do you have any proof that it worked or did not work? Right? That's one question. The second aspect is make communication a habit. Right? Now, this is actually one of the most unfortunate things. Is we tend to be very quiet. We assume that we do good work, the other person is going to understand what we did. Okay. That's not working out, right? We need to be able to, because, if I'm a product manager, my problem is shipping. So if I come in and say, no, you're going to have, this has got a user problem, they're not thinking about that. They just want to ship the product. Okay. Or if you are an engineer, my product is how to write the code most effectively. I'm not thinking about a user problem. So now you have to be able to learn to communicate very, very effectively. And this is something that we need to practice day in and day out, right? The third aspect that I also say, and this is something that I always tell my students, is be known, right? Be known before you apply. What that essentially means is build your brand, invest in yourself. And what that also means is in fact, for my mentor, my initial, I had a really amazing set of mentors. Initially, one of my mentors told me, Prasad, the first job you apply for is going to be because you applied for it, right? The first job you get. After that, every other job should be because somebody referred you to it. Okay. So the question that I want you to ask for yourself is, do you have the network? Do you have the branding to be able to be referred into opportunities? Okay. Because a lot of opportunities close, and this is something we've seen before as well, but a lot of opportunities close before they're even posted because some referral took that job. Okay. And that's what I want you to think is these are the three things that you need to think about. Let's go on to the next slide. Right. Now, I'm going to deep dive a little bit into each of these elements. And so when you talk about what evidence do I need to build that holds up? Okay. Now, when you're writing a design brief, okay, is it a fictional design brief or are you talking about a real world problem? Right. So you need to think about it, right? Is your work visible? Okay. And has that been launched? Is a customer using it? What is the outcome? So those are the questions. Now, in fact, what we do with our clients, with our students is they have to work with a real world company, right? They have to ship a product with that company. That product should be visible in the market, right? So that is where you're escalating the states. Yes, I have done something and it's delivered value, right? The second aspect is seek rigorous critique. Now, one of the things that I feel is we are all a little bit shy on being criticized. But again, unless you get criticized, how do you learn, right? It is better to be criticized in private than to be criticized in an environment where you have, a client or a customer or a future, recruiter who's criticizing you to your face. It feels really bad at that point. So my point is practice receiving that critique and practice fixing your design. Practice listening, because a lot of times I've seen somebody may criticize it in a job. Okay. The other person says, oh, this is really good data. I did not think about it. Thank you very much. I'm going to take it in. Excellent. That person got hired because they learned the art of listening to that critique. Okay. So it is not just getting the critique and improving yourself. It's also learning the skill to listen and respond back to the other person. So that's one thing. And the other aspect that I would say is peer reviews, right? If you have friends within the design circle, like do peer reviews. As many peer reviews as you can do, the better it is for you because you're now able to look at the same problem from multiple perspectives. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay. Now, this is one of those things where you have to make communication a habit. Okay. Show up and make your point every time. Learn to communicate. Communication is not just spoken, it is written, right? So, a simple thing as if you're sitting in a meeting, you've got all the meeting, you write out the meeting minutes and you communicate it out to people. Okay. You send out timely communication, send out emails, all that stuff. So, that is show up and make your point. Basically practice your art of explaining what you're doing. Don't just expect the work to explain itself, and then speak in the stakeholders language. What does that mean, right? If your product manager is saying I want to ship it, you say, well, okay, we want to do this, but what is the cost, right? The product manager says I want to ship it to X user. Well, this user is going to not going to like it. If you ship it, it's going to delay by 2 days. When you have those conversations, the stakeholders language, the stakeholder knows, okay, this is what I need to do to be able to do better work. Okay. So this is where we need to understand what the stakeholders' concerns are and then be able to communicate in that perspective. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay. Now, this is one which is, which is absolutely important, is be known before you apply. And I also tell all my students, right, you need to invest your time in your brand. So, we do branding exercises for all of our students. So what you need to do is work publicly, work consistently. Every week, maybe you do one or two. Just write a post, put something out there that is central to yourself, right? Be very sincere. It's not just about posting something for the sake of posting, but really being very sincere about what you're doing and be aware that people are going to be judging for what you've written. Okay. And then let people build enough connections so people can vouch for you. Say, oh, I know you. I know this person. This person is good. This person has been writing good stuff. So it's not just about posting, but it's also about engaging the people and building your network. If you can build up your network, you never know where those opportunities are going to come. In fact, a year and a half ago, we did this research where one of the people who was my students had lost his job. And I said, can we get you a job in 30 days? And we just did this experiment where we said, okay, we're going to have a group of 10 or 15 people together. We are all posting. And when we post, we are going to amplify this person's information. Okay. Whatever this person writes, we're going to amplify it, say good job or whatever, we're going to talk about it. Let us see what happens. Turns out this person had 4 job inquiries within the first 2 weeks. Okay. So this branding element is absolutely real. Okay. And there is a difference between you applying for a job versus somebody coming to you and say, hey, do you want a job? Okay. It has an implication in terms of how much respect you get. It also has an implication in terms of how much salary you get. All of that changes. So this is not a trivial element. This is something that you want to be thinking long term and very systematically about. Let's go on to the next slide. So one thing I do want you to kind of say is, if given you a lot of feedback, I've given you a lot of ideas, and I want you to understand that nothing happens overnight. Okay. This is not like a Bollywood movie or a Tollywood movie or whatever, right? Where things, somebody is peace loving and all of a sudden they become an ace fighter. Does not happen that way. It happens through practice, day in and day out, consistency, practice, having the right mentors, learning the right methodologies and techniques, and that's what gets you there. Okay. So it's a process, and the more you invest in yourself, the better you get at it. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay. Now, one of the things before I open it up for questioning, I would say that join the WhatsApp group because that is where we make our announcements, we do our communication, and then quizzes or whatever. And then once these videos become live or any of the content becomes live, we also share it with you out there. So please join the WhatsApp group so you get an opportunity to engage with us at that level. And we are always there to kind of help you support and grow your career. All right. And then I think there's one more thing before we have to do before we go on. So Vijay.
Just a moment,
Let's go to
Prasid.
the
I was
next.
just typing the message for everybody.
So Vijay, we got your next slide up.
Yep. Sorry. So, guys, I believe, thanks for joining. And at JG Online, we remain committed to creating learning experience that, produce academic excellence with industry relevance. For those of who are inspired to deepen their expertise in this domain, I encourage you to explore our Master of Design and User Experience with AI program. I put down the website link. So I would just like to explain the process. It's very clear. I believe I can see a few of the very few candidates who are already in touch with the counselors have come here, I believe, to understand about the jobs or, in the Q&A round, to ask few questions. It's a very simple process. You download the brochure, understand the curriculum of the program, and you fill in your basic academic details and, you put up your qualification. And after that, there's a small SOP for us to understand what value would you add for this particular degree if you're shortlisted. And Prasad and team would be reviewing that, and there would be a interview. And please take this interview seriously. It is not more of to understand are you the right candidate or a left candidate, but just to understand that would this degree be useful for each other? What value you would be adding for the degree and what value the degree would be adding for your career. And if in case you're shortlisted with that particular interview, I believe you would be moving forward with a scholarship if in case your performance is right, and you would be shortlisted, and you would be entering to the program. And that being said, I would like to say the admissions have been started and we are looking out for a very elite group of students who can support the growth of JG Online. So I really look forward for you to also welcoming for our future webinars. And also I request you guys, please connect with our respective counselors and be a part of a JGU learning. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.
All right, so now we can open up for questions. I do want to add one thing is, this master's degree program was created because of the problems that I faced when I was running my company. We struggled a lot to find the right match of talent, right? And this is one of the program. My dream was, again, for me, I moved to the US because I could not find the quality of education that I wanted for myself so I could build a good career. And so for me, I always felt that the Indian system was a few years behind the American system. And so this master's degree program is designed in a way that whatever happens in the Bay Area, right, we are able to incorporate that into our program in less than 6 months. In fact, every 18 months or so, the curriculum goes through a major overhaul. And every 6 months or so, it goes through a minor overhaul because the field itself is evolving so fast that we need to kind of modify what tools, what processes, what systems. And a lot of it is driven by what we are seeing in the companies, right? What our advisors and mentors tell us within the companies. They say, in my company, this is how things are happening. That is how we are modifying our curriculum to meet those requirements. So that's at least from my perspective. We want to keep it relevant, timely, and value driven. That's it. Go ahead and let's start taking some questions.
Yeah. So the first question is AI going to severely affect UI UX jobs? And how should one start the UI UX journey as a beginner? It's asked by Samruddhi.
Right. Samruddhi, I'm glad you asked that question. And unfortunately, I don't have an easy answer for you. Okay. What that basically means is freshers, people who are recently starting off their jobs, are having the worst of it all. Because with AI, if one person is able to do the same work in about that like a team of 10 people is able to do, then the question is, which person do you want to keep in the company? Generally, the person who's, it's not just the most senior most, is the person who's most open. So it's usually the people with the 3 to 7 years of experience. Those guys have the most amount of opportunity because they're still flexible enough and to understand that there's a new system, new process, and they're going to adopt it, right? That said, does that mean that there is no hope for freshers? Absolutely not, right? I think you as freshers have to kind of start thinking a little bit more strategically, okay? It's not just about doing the tools. Tools are done. Tools are automated. In fact, today, the question is, if you ask 10 designers, how many of them use Figma to launch? I would argue that that is a much lower number compared to before 2022. Okay. In fact, there are designers that are not even touching Figma to kind of get their work done. Okay. So what I want you to think about, don't focus on tools. You need to focus on the mindset. You need to focus on getting live experience. Okay. Uh, you need to focus on, your communication. So you have to be a little bit, you have to focus on, uh, polishing yourself a little bit more rigorously, right? And that is the fundamental aspect that I would say everything that I've said here applies to you as well, but it applies a little bit more. You have to spend a lot more time on that, right? And if it means working for a company for free for like 2 or 3 months where you can get your portfolio built up or whatever, do it, right? Because that is what is going to open the doors for you. Okay. Um, is there anything else that I would want to add? Saurabh, is there anything else you'd want to add for her?
No, I think that's fine, Prasad. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. But there is one question that I think there's a chat from Harshita. This is, in your current role, she says, I feel like my design task had a huge role in getting me selected. And I would kind of say, absolutely, yeah, your design task could help you. And there's still quite a few companies that are doing design tasks. Our, our goal for this presentation is not to talk about what's happening today, but where we are going to progress in the next year or two, right? And so that's where we see design task is important, but there's still probably going to be a lot of questions around the design task. Why did you do this? What were the alternatives? How did you think through it? So there's still a lot of critical thinking, questioning that will come. And eventually, at some point, if you have a good enough portfolio, the design task is irrelevant because I can ask those same questions of your portfolio and get get similar answers. So again, from what I'm seeing is a lot of the bigger companies, the design task is not as important. It may be a filtering element, but it's not as important for the selection process. All right. So let's go on to the next question, Saurabh.
Yeah. So next question is, AI is extremely important in today's world. How do we make sure we are not overusing it in our lives, especially in our growing careers? It's asked by Nidhi.
So Nidhi, one of the things that we do for our students is we do something called the Impossible Design Challenge. Okay. Which is every year we have all our students come onto campus for 9 days and they work on a problem that is impossible. So last year, the Impossible Design Challenge was, it was given by, the government of Singapore, actually an agency of the government of Singapore that runs their whole genomic data set. Okay, this was the agency that coordinated the whole COVID-19 response. Okay. And the challenge we gave to our students was you have 9 days, you have AI, you have your teams of 6 people. You have to ship a product that can help the world identify a virus before it becomes big, right? Currently, the problem is once it becomes big, you can create a vaccine. But if you can identify it 6 months before it becomes big, then you're not going to have a pandemic. You can stop the pandemic immediately. And that was the challenge we gave to all our people. Right? Now, the interesting learning that we got out of that was in 9 days, the winning team came out, everybody shipped. That was number one, right? With AI, everybody shipped. Okay. So that was great. The winning team, the client was very happy. They loved it. In fact, to the point that they turned around and they hired somebody in Singapore to take this idea further to the next level. Okay. Which was a huge win for the work. But then when I, as a designer, look at the work, I realize what is the difference between the team that was number 1 and number 5. Okay. Not much. It was maybe like a 4 or 5% difference. So the features were similar, the design was more or less similar, the elements were more or less similar. So then the question that happened was if all the teams were working for different, there were 5 or 6 different companies that were all working for, working on the same problem but working separately, then all the companies would have come up with the same solution and none of them would have succeeded. Right? And which is what I think comes back to the question of, well, how do I use AI? Right? Now, what I want you to do is this is the number one thing that I would say, right? Number one, before you use AI, know your job. If you were to do it manually, how would you do it, right? How would you decide if something is good or bad? You need to have a decision-making process in place. Okay. So know your science, know your job. Then the next step is understand what tasks you're giving the AI. Are you telling the AI, I want you to develop an app that does A, B, C, and D? That's not going to work, right? A better way would be to kind of break down the experiences. Well, what does this app do? Who's my customer? What are my experiences? What are my outcomes? Then you say, this is my experience. This is the outcomes I want to have. And these are the goals. And this is the kind of information that we're going to present. Now get the system to generate. Okay. So what that means is plan before you give the work. Because once you have an opinion and the system generates, you will know whether it is good or bad. If you just generate without thinking about it, you have no idea whether the AI did something or not, right? I mean, it's going to look great, but does it work? Probably not. Okay. So that is the other aspect, which is know what you want and learn to manage the AI. Then breaking down the task, and then also understanding of how you want to critique and have the vocabulary to explain what you have in your mind, right? So these are the skills that you want to have. And it's also one other important skill that you need to have is knowing when the AI is going in circles. So when you want to take control and do some work and submit it back, or when you want to let the AI complete the job. Okay. So at a high level, if I was to say, then, the skills that you need to think about, like, with AI is you need to have critical thinking skills, and you need to have that management skill of like, okay, how am I going to manage the AI and what are the tasks that I want to do? If you have those two skills, use AI, great, you'll be successful. You don't have those two skills, you use AI, you're going to keep going in circles. Your work is just simply a 5-hour job is going to be like a 20-hour job. So that's where it's going to be. So AI is equally capable of making a small job very big. So be very aware of that.
Next question. So I think that also answers the question for how to effectively use our time in UX. But if there's anything else, please add, Prasad. This is asked by Sangeeta.
Could you repeat the question again, please?
How to effectively use our time in UX.
Very good question. I'm just thinking there's just so much stuff to kind of think through, right? Okay. So basic, simple, Saurabh, if you can share your screen, I just want to share some websites where people
Sure.
can look at it and, understand, right?
Sure.
One thing I would say is if you want to understand UX, understand intention, right? What is a user's intention and how are you solving it? So, like a classic example is, take any website. Okay. Just go to like Amazon.com and then just go to like, let's look at the homepage, right? This is a way of thinking that I want you to practice. Okay. Just look at this website. Well, what is the intention? What intentions is Amazon designing for? And how many intentions does Amazon have? Okay. So one intention is obviously I want to continue what I was doing before. So that is an intention. Okay. The second intention is potentially, I have a certain product in mind that I'm looking for. So I want to search and get there as quickly as possible. Okay. Now, the third intention is, I have an idea of what I want, but I don't know exactly what I want. So I've got all those menu items on the top. So the top navigation elements. Okay. Then I might also have an intention for looking for deals. Okay. Scroll down. Now, what else could I want? So these are things that I have not thought about, but I may be open for other stuff that I need to purchase. Let's scroll down. Keep scrolling down right down to the bottom, right? And then I might have questions about what is this company? How do I sell on Amazon and all that stuff? So these are all intentions. But then there's an interesting question, right? Well, how important is what intention for Amazon, right? Or for the user. Okay. So this is what I call planning for how big or small an intention is. So the biggest intention, the most likely intention that Amazon probably figured out was continuing a certain shopping task. Okay. Which is why it is on top of the screen and it's right there. So this is how you kind of plan your screen. So I've got YouTube videos. If you guys are interested, we have a whole YouTube channel. In fact, the whole Impossible Design Challenge is also on YouTube. So if you can just put the links to those playlists, that would be great. But the idea is, how do you plan your real estate, right? What are the different intentions and how am I ensuring that the appropriate intention gets the appropriate amount of weightage, right? Why is search so small and why is continue shopping so big, right? Understanding the difference, that is one aspect. Okay. This is one skill that I think all of us need to learn, because when UI or AI gives us a screen, you have to be able to decide, judge on the same basis. Okay. Then the next element that I would say is go to the patterns website, the UI patterns website, right? And these are again things that I tell my students, you guys have to be really good at this stuff, right? So what are the different patterns out there? What is the intention behind that pattern and what are the trade-offs? Because just like a doctor, no matter what medicine you give, every medicine has side effects. The same way, every pattern has side effects. So if you want to just spend some time, like literally 30 minutes a day, click on any one of those elements, right? Click on like drag and drop. Okay. Now this website is like 5 years behind current practices, but it gives you a way of thinking. Okay. So here's a pattern. So what is the problem that you're solving? What is the visual pattern? How do you use it? It gives you all that information. Scroll down, right? So it gives you the rationale, all that stuff. Then it gives you alternative solutions. It also tells you how many different ways a certain pattern has been implemented. So you can compare those patterns against each other. So you have a way of, it's what I call building your vocabulary. Okay. How do I build a vocabulary to explain what I want in my mind? Okay. How do I build a vocabulary for saying whether something is good or bad, right? And so these are the skills, these are fun. These are like not, sexy tasks, right? These are like the boring tasks that you do, but every day you spend just 30 minutes, educate yourself, understand, do these mind exercises, you get definitely a lot sharper on the UX space. Okay. Now, with AI, now that brings a new level of complexity, but I would say this is a great starting point, even for the person that asked about freshers, right? Spend some time here, learn, and have that ability to communicate. You get really good. All right. What's the next question?
Sure. What does the Indian market for design-driven companies look like? Are these majorly enterprises or strategic design consultancies? Sharath is asking this.
Man, today we're getting really good questions. So, Sarath, I think it's no longer Indian design consultancy, Indian design, there's no such concept anymore, right? With the advent of remote work, the number of companies that are hiring internationally has exploded. Okay. It's very common to see companies that have like one employee in Philippines, one employee in Colombia, one employee in India. It is very, very common to see that. Okay. So the question I would challenge you to ask is, it's no longer Indian talent pool, right? Because you're now being benchmarked with the global talent pool. Okay. So how easy or hard is it for an Indian company to go hire someone in Philippines or Vietnam or whatever? Not very hard, because you have companies called PEOs, which is, I think, employee on record or whatever, employer on record. So what they do is they set up the company. So I don't have to set up a company in India. So out through this PEO, I will hire, and I'm paying the salary, I'm paying PF, all that stuff I'm paying through this company, and that person is an employee for my company. No issues. Okay. And so what I would say is, when you start looking at Indian design companies, that's not it, right? The top design talent, like I said, the demand is so high and the supply is so small that the top companies are willing to hire from wherever they can find the talent, right? They're willing to put a one-person shop in Indore if required. Okay. And so that is something that I want you to think about, which is, don't just think about like, design-driven companies as being big companies. Of course, you have the Microsofts, the Oracles, and all that stuff. But you also had like, UX Reactive. We were, a small design studio. We had a small design studio in India. Majority of our work was done out of San Francisco, but we still had a design studio in India, right? And we were given Fast Company awards, and we were given the Forbes, forget what the name of the company is. Forbes, no. What's that? Fast Company. Inc.
Inc.
5000 was there, but we
Yeah,
got a design award, right? What was that company?
Fast
So,
Company.
anyways, we got this really prestigious design award. I forget. But, the other companies that won that year were Google and Microsoft and all those guys. So, my argument is, it doesn't matter whether it's big companies or small companies, right? You need to talk to the leadership and understand, well, what is their vision? Why are they doing it? What is their depth of understanding? How do they look at a problem? I think that is what is more important. You also have huge companies like, that will come and set up shop in India, and they know that the quality is bad, so they will just say, okay, just do this basic stuff. But those days are gone now, especially as far as AI is concerned. They're saying that stuff can be automated. I just want quality. So more and more companies of the type 3 types are looking at quality. Type 2 is just trying to, like, it's a sweatshop, right? They're just going to get as much as they can out of you. So that's what you want to be aware of. Just keep an eye out for it. Okay. Now, what does it take to be a chief design officer? Who are the main design leaders that we can draw inspiration from? Now, couple of people. These are people that I've worked with, and they've been absolutely phenomenal, right? One guy that I want you to kind of talk to, and this guy is available on ADP list, and he talks and does that. Bob Baxley, right? I worked with him, right? Absolutely phenomenal. He joined Apple when Steve Jobs rejoined. He managed the team that built the whole Apple store, which till today has not had any changes in it. Okay. And so he built the Apple store, and then phenomenal designer. Then he left and then he joined, I believe it's a ThoughtSpot. And he built an amazing design team in ThoughtSpot, including a design team in India. Now, phenomenal guy. He's very reflective, thinks through, amazing guy, right? So definitely like follow him if you want to understand the spirituality of design, so to say, right? Another designer that I respect, who's actually now become a venture capitalist, okay, is a guy called Tom Chi. Okay. He and I worked together very closely. Again, phenomenal designer. Went on to work with Google, launched Google Glasses with Google. In fact, he's got a TED talk about launching Google Glasses. If you're curious, just look at that. And now what he says is, I'm going to use design as a lens to think about venture capital financing and stuff like that. He's into sustainable venture capital. So you should actually look him up as well. Now, there's a third person who's also there, Luke Wroblewski, right? He's written the seminal book on form design, but now he moved to Google, did a lot of interesting stuff there, and then now he's now become a venture capitalist as well, right? Which again, for a lot of you might think like, okay, how are so many people becoming venture capitalists? Good designers are innate venture capitalists. That's what the whole point is. Like, we struggle and say, okay, I want to be a designer, then I want to be a product manager. No, right? You know your job really well. That means you know your business, you know your customers, you know how to evaluate stuff. You are invaluable in that space, right? So this guy's also become a VC. So you should look him up, Luke Wroblewski, right? Phenomenal guy that you want to follow up on. Okay. But again, coming back to the larger question, what does it take to be a chief design? And then there's, of course, Ria Thosar, right? She doesn't talk a lot. She's one of the mentors in our ecosystem as well. She doesn't talk a lot. She leads the AI initiatives at SAP. Okay. Now, phenomenal work that she's been doing. And again, see if you can reach out to her, connect to her and all that stuff. But again, what does it take to be a chief design officer? What it takes to be a chief design officer is, let's actually think through this, right? At the junior level, you're delivering work. You're only valued for doing work. At the next level, when you're like doing, a manager level work, you're managing the process. Okay. What is the process? Is everything working and all that stuff? And you're managing people. Okay. At the next level, you're managing outcomes. Okay. So, which is at a director level, somebody is saying you're managing, I want to double my retention. So you're managing that retention. Okay. The next level higher, you're managing not outcomes, but you're managing the environment. Okay. So how do I create an environment where talented people come in and work together, right? So at a chief design level, you're actually managing the vision of the organization. Okay. And what you're doing is you're then using the help of the people who can create the environment for that vision. Then you're getting the people who can manage the outcomes. Then those guys are depending on people who can manage the people. Those guys are people who are managing the outcomes and the process and the outcomes, right? So when you think about it from top to bottom, okay, that is where the value is. So at the end of the day, something fails. It's a chief design officer that is going to get criticized for it because either they didn't hire the right people or they didn't get the right vision or they didn't have the right articulation or whatever it is, right? So that's where it is. So the other aspect for Achieve, the higher you go is ambiguity increases. The more ambiguity you have from day to day, right? So what that basically means is up to a director level, you're fine, right? Any position above a director level is at the mercy of the market and your colleagues, right? If they feel you're not pulling your weight, you're going to be fired. So the average life cycle of a chief design officer, if you look on LinkedIn or whatever, right, you'll see a lot of people that go work as a head of design or whatever, go work for a year, they move on to a new company. That's because something didn't gel or it didn't work or whatever, you move on, right? So there are very few people that actually stay in a company and stabilize it and make it work. So that is also something you need to think about is how do you translate your message from vision to execution, right? So that's also a chief designer's work as you kind of chief design officer's work as you think through it. Okay. Hopefully that answers your question, Sarath.
So I think we are hitting the time limit for today, but Prasad, would you like to take one final one?
Yeah, let me see. We have Chaitanya's, which is top tier companies seem to prefer domain specific experience, but not a direct match. How would I frame and present them as relevant? Okay, so how much are recruiters looking for usage of AI tools? Certification for people who follow the live. Is it possible to forward the official certificate to me? Thank you for your time. So I'm not going to take the certificate question. That's not something that we are looking at right now. How much are, I think I can answer Muzakir's question really quick and then I can jump to Chaitanya's question. Muzakir's question is, how much are recruiters looking for usage of AI tools and design workflows for hiring? They assume that you do it. Okay. You don't do it, that's going to be a rejection criteria. So I would say at this point, 100%, right? Either recruiters or the technical guys, one of them will ask that question, what are you using with AI, what speed, what mistakes, all that stuff. So 100% of everybody is looking at AI and saying, do you know? But are they asking the right questions? Maybe not. Okay. Which is where, you see the problem of token maxing because, every organization earlier was saying like, okay, how many tokens are you using within your work to do your work? Okay. So, oh, I'm using 10,000 tokens. Great. You're a good employee. I'm using 2,000 tokens. You're a bad employee. But now companies are realizing tokens are not a good way of measuring stuff, right? So they're now starting to say, okay, no, it is the quality of work and the speed of work that is happening. So again, the metric is changing, but every recruiter is looking for some level of AI thinking through this thought process, right? And they're also looking at, do you understand the workflow with AI? Do you understand what needs to change? Now, that said, Chaitanya is saying, most top tier companies look for people within a domain specific experience. Yes, they do. That is because the talent is so scarce, right? And because there's so many fake resumes in the market that it is very, very hard for a company to say, okay, who's good and who's not good. So they're just saying, okay, if I am in a company that is doing enterprise productivity, I'm going to look for people who have worked at Zoho and I'm going to hire them. Right? So that thing is happening. But the question that you're asking is how do I move forward, right? The way you want to move forward is you need to be working in different domains. While you're working itself, work in different aspects of your business, right? If you're saying, how do I retain users or how do I, because most UI, most design solves the same kinds of problems: user retention, user acquisition, user awareness, right? User decision making. So those are similar types of problems. And so if you abstract one level higher and you frame yourself in that context, it becomes much easier to shift jobs into other domains. Right? So I think that's about it.
Thank you,
And then
Prasad.
I would say one thing is, if you are looking at career opportunities and you're looking at growing, do look at the master's degree program, because this is a state-of-the-art program. What was happening 6 months ago to a year ago is literally what is being taught in the program itself. So I would strongly encourage you to kind of look at it. The other thing that we also do is we have a lifetime program, because what that means is even after you graduate, you get lifetime support, because anything that's happening, the latest in the industry, whatever, you are looped in on that. Right. That's it. Back to you, Vijay. Vijay, back to you. You're on mute.
Yep. Thank you for that. So as we conclude
Thank
today's
you, guys.
webinar, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Mr. Prasad and also Saurabh for sharing their valuable insights, experience, and perspectives with us. Your contributions have made today's discussion both engaging and enriching. I again apologize, for the starting technical glitch, and we ensure that this wouldn't repeat again in the future. I would also like to thank all our participants for joining us today. And I believe there are a few candidates who wants to understand a few names what Mr. Prasad has mentioned. I'll ensure the few details of the webinar would be put up
We'll put it in the
the
WhatsApp
workshop.
group. We'll put it
And
all in
as
the
well
WhatsApp.
as that, I think the recording of this particular webinar will always be put up on the YouTube. So I request everybody to please follow our social pages so that you guys would be updated. Not with just this is just a part one webinar. We are coming up with the series of webinar. And for those of you who found today's discussion inspiring, I would like to further understand your profile better. I encourage you to explore our Masters of Design and User Experience with AI program at JJU Online. The program is really designed well to equip learners with the skills, knowledge, and the industry exposure required to thrive at intersection of design, technology, and as well as innovation. That being said, thank you once again for being a part of today's session, guys. We hope to stay connected and welcome many of you to the JJU Online Learning community. And thanks, Prasad. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank
Bye.
you, Vijay. Thank you, everyone. Bye.